My name is Linda Harper, and at 53, I stood on the precipice of my new life. I had divorced David, reclaimed my career, asserted my financial independence, and even navigated the complex currents of an inheritance from my own mother. My beautiful Gold Coast condo, with its sweeping views of Lake Michigan, was my fortress, a sanctuary of hard-won peace. I had painstakingly rebuilt my identity, proving that a woman's second act can truly be her main event. My brain fog had long dissipated, replaced by a razor-sharp clarity, especially when it came to understanding the subtle ways people tried to control me. But even after shedding a toxic marriage and confronting family entitlement, some threads still clung. Some battles were never truly over, merely dormant. The lingering shadow wasn't a malicious attack anymore. It was the crushing expectation of my adult children, and sometimes my brothers, a polite, almost loving pressure to conform to their vision of my aging. They saw my peace not as my achievement, but as an opportunity for their future convenience. They assumed my next step would be predictable, available, and easily managed by them. Then came the family meeting. A gathering orchestrated by my children and tacitly supported by my brothers, ostensibly to discuss my future. A meeting where I was invited to participate, but not to lead. A meeting where, when I dared to voice my own plans, my own deepest desires for the remainder of my life, my own flesh and blood, in their casual condescension, told me to let mom talk. They thought they were merely dealing with an aging parent's inevitable need for guidance. They thought they were putting the emotional one back in her place. They had no idea that they were addressing a woman who was no longer content to simply talk. They were about to learn that this mom, this supposedly pliable woman, was done explaining. She was done waiting. And she was about to make a monumental announcement that would redefine her future and dramatically alter theirs, without asking for anyone's permission. Before I tell you every single, meticulously planned, and ultimately satisfying detail of how I turned that night of quiet patronization into my ultimate declaration of independence, I want to invite you into this space. If you've ever loved your children fiercely, only to find their adult expectations suffocating your own life, if you've ever felt your age being used as a silent weapon to dismiss your autonomy, especially by those who should know better, then hit that subscribe button. This channel is a sanctuary for the unheard, a gathering place for women who are reclaiming their power and their right to choose, one decisive action at a time. You won't want to miss seeing how this unfolds. Part 1. The golden cage of expectation. My life in Chicago's Gold Coast condo was a beautiful irony. After my divorce from David and the decision to fully embrace my independence, I had purchased this apartment as my sanctuary. It was modern, elegant, with stunning views of Lake Michigan, a testament to my hard-won freedom. My graphic design business, Harper Creative, thrived in my West Loop studio, filling my days with creative passion and professional purpose. My relationships with my children, Mark and Emily, had undergone their own profound transformations. Mark, at 26, now respected me as a shrewd businesswoman. Emily, at 25, while occasionally exhibiting a remnant of her youthful self-absorption, had begun to genuinely appreciate my wisdom, particularly after the nursery plan incident. Yet, despite these triumphs, a subtle, almost invisible thread still tugged at me. It was the silken cord of expectation, woven from decades of maternal love and their unconscious sense of entitlement. My children, now successful adults, saw my newfound peace not as an end in itself, but as a transitional phase. They expected me to seamlessly move into the role of a placid, available matriarch, a wise elder, yes, but primarily a convenient resource for their burgeoning lives. My independent career was a hobby, my freedom a prelude to a quiet, compliant retirement. The condominium itself, my beautiful sanctuary, had become, in their eyes, a temporary holding pattern for their eventual convenience. Mark, always the pragmatic one, occasionally alluded to its asset value in the Chicago real estate market, hinting that I might eventually downsize to a more appropriate retirement community, freeing up the condo for one of them. Emily, with less subtlety, would still occasionally joke about her future plans for the place. "Mom, You have so much space. Once you decide to move somewhere smaller, I'd love to take this place over. It would be perfect for when Alex and I start our family, right? I would laugh it off, offering vague smiles and non-committal murmurs. But the underlying message was clear. My choices, my needs, my future, they were still subjects for their planning, their eventual acquisition. My newfound freedom, my glorious peace, was merely a delay in their predetermined timeline for my golden years. They believed they knew my next steps better than I did. They loved me fiercely, but they saw my life through the lens of their own convenience, their own sense of linear progression. The menopause, which had once felt like a biological betrayal, had matured into a profound source of internal clarity. It had burned away my patience for disrespect, my willingness to be silent when my autonomy was threatened. I had already fought fiercely for my literal space, the nursery incident. Now, I felt the silent summons to fight for my existential space, the right to chart my own path, unburdened by their well-meaning, but utterly stifling, expectations. The weight of their unspoken future plans was a constant, low hum in my consciousness, dulling the vibrancy of my present. I yearned for a life utterly free of projected expectations. I wanted to choose my own next chapter, without discussion, without permission, without subtly having to justify my very existence to those who benefited most from my compliance. My desire for untainted autonomy grew, a powerful, undeniable craving. The Gold Coast condo, for all its beauty, was beginning to feel like a cage with gilded bars. And I was itching to fly free. Part 2. The command for compliance. The family meeting was, of course, David's brainchild, but eagerly adopted by Mark and Emily. It arrived on a crisp Saturday afternoon in early November. My 54th birthday had just passed, an event barely acknowledged by them, submerged under their increasingly loud concerns about my future. David had called me 3 weeks prior, his voice oozing his typical corporate casualness. "Lynn, darling, Mark and Emily and I were thinking, it's time for a proper family sit-down to discuss your next steps. You know, since you're officially unencumbered now, just us. We'll grab some coffee. Your place. My place. Of course. My sanctuary. The chosen venue for their gentle intervention. I knew exactly what next steps meant. It meant managing my independence. It meant ensuring I didn't make any decisions they deemed rash or impractical. It meant implicitly planning my next move their way. David still saw me as a valuable asset, one to be managed. And my children, having seen him successfully manage our complex household for decades, largely bought into his paternalistic view of my golden years. I agreed. I always agreed, outwardly. My quiet compliance was, by now, an art form. But internally, a storm was brewing. I prepared the condo meticulously. Not for their comfort, but for the stage. The beautiful living room, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the lake-facing windows, would be the perfect backdrop. I arranged my most striking art pieces they rarely commented on display. My large, elegant chessboard sat on the coffee table, a subtle visual metaphor for the game I knew we were about to play. Mark, 26, arrived first, looking crisp in a blazer, carrying a tablet. Emily, 25, followed shortly after, impeccably dressed, her professional poise tinged with an unusual earnestness. David, 55, strolled in last, radiating his usual smooth confidence, carrying a leather-bound portfolio. He wore the subtly benevolent smile of a man about to perform a great service. We sat on my Italian leather sofa, facing the fireplace, the perfect domestic tableau. The silence, after the perfunctory greetings, was thick with unspoken agendas. "Thanks for having us, Mom," Emily began, her voice soft, almost saccharine. "We're just so excited to talk about your future." "Yes, Mom," Mark chimed in, opening his tablet. "This is a really important discussion about optimizing your golden years. It's proactive. David and I have put together some options." My heart pounded with a mix of fury and exhilaration. They weren't talking about my future. They were talking about their management of it. And David was leading the charge, ever the grand conductor. Linda, David began, leaning forward, his voice a smooth, deep baritone he reserved for important presentations. We've all been so proud of you. Your recovery from the divorce. Your success with Harper Creative. It's truly inspiring. But now that you're in your 50s, it's time to think about long-term stability. About settling down. Settling down? I repeated, my voice calm, but with an underlying current of ice. Yes, Mark interjected, clicking open a presentation on his tablet. We've identified a few key areas for discussion: housing, lifestyle, financial planning for sustained long-term health. He looked at me, a polite, condescending smile on his lips. Emily and I, with Dad's insights, really believe we have some solid strategies to make this next chapter effortless for you. Effortless for me, I mused aloud. The words tasted like ash. They weren't suggesting options. They were issuing a command. They wanted to steer me, the old mother, towards their preferred, predictable future, a future where I was safe, compliant, and out of their hair. A future that allowed their future inheritance plans to proceed without disruption. My serenity was now their concern. My choices their mandate. We thought, Emily added, her voice softening, leaning into the emotional leverage, that the Gold Coast condo is lovely, Mom, but it's really quite large for one person. And there are some great senior living communities out there. They have amenities, clubs, activities. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. And it would be so much easier for us to visit you. Easier for you, I repeated, tasting the bitterness. Their concern was simply convenience. Their preferred future for me was retirement, shrinking my life to fit into a pre-packaged box, becoming available for their occasional visits and grandchild care. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. They used words like security, prudence, simplification, all wrapped in a velvet glove of concern. But underneath, I felt the sharp prick of their underlying demand. Comply. Shrink. Behave. My chest tightened. The hot flashes, those powerful engines of my recent transformations, had dissipated. But the internal heat, the fire of righteous indignation, was now burning cold and steady. It was the same fire that had fueled me through David's casual contempt, through the revelation of his secret life, through the brazen entitlements of my children and brothers. It was the fire of a woman done being managed, done being told her next steps, done being silenced. This meeting wasn't about me. It was about them, about their comfort, about their control, about securing their perceived future. And I was about to teach them that the woman they were talking about, this mom they thought they could manage, was an entirely new entity. And she had her own very precise plan. Part 3. The dismissive label and the silent calculation. The family meeting continued its slow, painful descent into polite condescension. Mark pulled up a spreadsheet on his tablet, illustrating cost efficiencies of downsizing from my spacious Gold Coast condo. Emily, meanwhile, brought out brochures for upscale senior living communities in the suburbs, places with names like Heritage Heights and Evergreen Meadows, complete with smiling, white-haired residents playing bridge or taking painting classes. David leaned back, watching me with the placid smile of a puppet master, his role limited to occasional, knowing nods that endorsed their proposals. They genuinely thought they were helping. They genuinely thought this was a perfectly reasonable, even loving discussion about my future. Their future. Their future, of course, included the Gold Coast condo eventually becoming available for one of them, without me squandering its value on frivolous travel or impractical choices. I tried to interject. I attempted to articulate my actual life, my thriving business, my deep satisfaction with my West Loop studio, the fact that I was more creatively fulfilled now than I had ever been. I spoke about the energy of my neighborhood, the new clients, the sense of purpose. I actually feel incredibly active and engaged right now, I said, trying to convey the vibrant reality of my life. My studio is bustling, and I have plans to expand into more digital art installations. This condo works perfectly for my current needs. And frankly, I'm not ready to settle down in a retirement community. I'm just getting started. My words were met with polite smiles. Then Mark spoke. Mom, he said, his voice gentle but firm. We understand you're enjoying your little hobby now. It's very sweet. But you need to be realistic about your age. You're in your mid-50s now. That's a different stage of life. High-energy corporate environments are for younger people. You need to focus on what's sustainable, on health, on peace of mind. We're just being pragmatic. Pragmatic. Another dagger. My thriving business, the culmination of decades of suppressed ambition, was reduced to a little hobby. My vibrant, dynamic second act was dismissed as a sweet diversion. And my agency, my power to define my own reality, was being overwritten by their pragmatic vision of my decline. Before I could reply, Emily, always the quickest to jump on a perceived weakness, chimed in. Yes, Mom. This is serious. You get a bit emotional about your work, we know. But you need to step back. And honestly, all that emotional talk about purpose and finding yourself, it's a bit much. It's a bit, well, dramatic. She smiled, that same patronizing, condescending smile she'd worn when I had protested her nursery plan. My heart pounded with a cold, righteous fury. Dramatic. There it was again. Their favorite word for any assertion of my autonomy that didn't fit their predefined box for my age and gender. My passion was emotional. My desires were dramatic. My very essence, if it conflicted with their convenient narrative, was pathologized. And then David, seeing their united front, decided to deliver the final, crushing blow. He put a hand gently on my knee, his touch surprisingly firm, his voice a soft, sympathetic murmur, laced with the most profound condescension. Honey, he said, his eyes filled with a manufactured concern. Let Mom talk. She's had a rough few years with the divorce, with the menopause. She's not quite herself. She needs our guidance now. We're just trying to help her make good decisions. He turned to Mark and Emily, giving them a subtle, knowing nod, a confirmation that they were right to gently shepherd their confused, emotional mother. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the best ones for them. Let Mom talk. The words echoed in my ears, amplified by the silent fury now raging within me. They weren't granting me permission to speak. They were issuing a command to conform. They were speaking over me, literally, telling me to step aside, so they could discuss my life. My autonomy, my very capacity for rational thought, was being erased by their casual, ageist dismissal, wrapped in the saccharine language of concern. This was a patriarchal coup, disguised as a family intervention. My mind, instead of succumbing to rage, became preternaturally calm. The fire of menopause had burned away all my patience for this kind of subtle violence. The tears, the helpless anger I might have felt years ago, vanished. They were replaced by a chilling clarity, a steel-like resolve. He told me to let Mom talk. Fine. I would talk. And what Mom would say would shatter their carefully laid plans into a million tiny, irrecoverable pieces. My blood hummed with quiet purpose. My external composure remained perfect. But internally, the pieces of a final, devastating strategy began to click into place. They thought they had cornered the emotional mom. They had no idea they were addressing the woman who was about to turn their entire future into a quiet, unpredictable inferno. This wasn't about talking. This was about acting. And I was about to begin. Part 4. The unseen preparation and the irony of the spreadsheet. My external stillness was a shield, allowing my internal world to roar to life with a focused, almost frightening energy. While Mark droned on about hypothetical investment scenarios for my retirement fund, and Emily flipped through brochures of sun-drenched golf courses in Arizona, her latest vision for my ideal, golden years, I was meticulously, silently, preparing my counterstrike. Their voices faded into a low hum, like background noise. All I could hear was the precise, calm calculation of my own mind. I sat there on my custom Italian sofa, the one they barely noticed, watching them perform their well-rehearsed act. I could see the glint of David's expensive watch as he gestured, The way Emily tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she thought she was making a particularly insightful point. They were so confident, so utterly oblivious. My fingers, hidden from their view, subtly navigated my smartphone. I opened a discrete tab to my personal banking app. My account was flush. My successful ventures with Harper Creative and Lumensphere had created a robust financial cushion, far exceeding anything David had ever envisioned for me. The small fortune inherited from my mother, meticulously managed in a private trust, whose details my brothers still thought they fully comprehended, gave me a breathtaking level of financial freedom. They talked about prudence. I was the very embodiment of it. While Mark projected income from a hypothetical condo sale and reinvestment strategy onto my flat-screen TV, I was mentally liquidating my visible assets. The Gold Coast condo was a significant piece of property, certainly. Its sale would provide substantial capital. But I had also amassed an impressive, liquid portfolio in the past 2 years, hidden from their casual assumptions. My focus was not just to sell the property. It was to disappear. To become completely untraceable. I thought about what a sabbatical truly meant. It meant total disengagement. It meant leaving the city. It meant disconnecting. This wasn't a cruise to the Danube, David's old, tired dream fund idea, now a distant memory. This was about shedding the very notion of a predictable future. It was about embracing the radical freedom of the unknown. I thought about how they had spoken of my age. Mid-50s. A different stage of life. They saw it as a time of slowing down, of gentle retreat. I saw it as a launch pad. Menopause, for me, had burned away the internal static. The hot flashes, the unpredictable emotional surges, they were the catalysts that had cleared my vision. I saw the world with searing clarity now. I saw their entitlement. And I saw my own power. I also mentally drafted a simple, precise email to Eleanor Vance, my trusted realtor who had handled the sale of my previous property. She understood discretion. She understood speed. Her commission would be significant, but worth every penny for the liberation she could offer. I would need her to list the condo, not just quietly, but as an expedited sale. Price to sell fast was the message. My ultimate goal wasn't just to sell. It was to vanish, to leave them without an anchor, without a central point of contact they could control. I then pulled up a series of previously open tabs on my phone, luxury adventure travel agencies. They showed images of remote eco-lodges in Costa Rica, hiking tours in Patagonia, long-term culinary immersion programs in rural Italy. These were not the predictable senior travel tours they probably envisioned for me. These were journeys of profound personal discovery. David was now pontificating about setting up a conservative retirement fund for me, a long-term, low-risk portfolio. The irony was so exquisite it almost made me laugh aloud. They had just told me to let Mom talk. And what Mom was about to say would render their entire meticulously crafted spreadsheet utterly irrelevant. My mind shifted to the strategic implications. How quickly could I actually execute this? The condo market in the Gold Coast was still strong. Eleanor could get an offer quickly. My finances were completely liquid. My business, Harper Creative, was flexible. I could manage my ongoing client projects remotely from anywhere in the world for several months. My clients trusted me. My young team in Chicago was competent enough to handle day-to-day operations with my remote oversight. This wasn't an impulsive decision born of a moment's anger. It was the devastating culmination of years of suppressed resentment, meticulously brought to fruition by the very judgment they had levied against me. They wanted to manage my life. They were about to lose their ability to even locate it. I closed the financial apps on my phone. I closed the travel websites. I subtly squared my shoulders. The air in the room, warm and heavy with their unspoken expectations, felt like a dense blanket I was about to throw off. They expected compliance. They were about to receive an earthquake. I watched David close his portfolio with a confident snap. He looked at me, a polite, expectant smile on his face. "So, Linda," he said, his voice laced with the condescension of a man who has delivered a perfect solution. "We think this plan gives you optimal security and convenience. Are you ready to proceed?" I looked at all three of them. My confident ex-husband, my entitled children, my family. The air was thick with their assumed victory. The silent conversation of their privilege hummed in the room. This was my stage, my last performance for them, and it was going to be my most magnificent. Part 5. The unseen hand and the grand announcement. The silence in the room stretched, heavy with David's expectant smugness, Mark's self-satisfied certainty, and Emily's eager anticipation. They looked at me, waiting for my customary quiet acquiescence, perhaps a small, grateful nod, maybe a hesitant question about details. They saw a woman in her mid-50s, gracefully transitioning into their predetermined idea of golden years, ready to be managed. They had no idea they were about to witness a seismic shift. I looked at each of them in turn, allowing my gaze to linger just long enough to convey a quiet assessment, devoid of emotion. David, my ex-husband, radiated a confident air of paternal benevolence. Mark, my son, fiddled with his tablet, clearly ready to walk me through charts of sustainable growth. Emily, my daughter, clutched her senior living brochures, her smile warm, yet utterly oblivious to the storm brewing. "Are you ready to proceed, Linda?" David prompted again, a slight edge of impatience in his voice. He had already moved on. The mom situation, he believed, was neatly resolved. I took a slow, deep breath, allowing the cool, 65-degree air of my condo, a climate I had fought for, a direct result of my strategic dismantling of David's wine cellar, to fill my lungs. It was a physical reminder of the power I had already claimed. "Actually, David," I began, my voice perfectly calm, clear, and resonant, surprising even myself with its unwavering strength. It cut through the silence with the precision of a scalpel. "You asked if Mom was ready to proceed. And Mom has indeed made some very important decisions about her future. Decisions I am ready to announce." Their smiles wavered. A flicker of unease crossed David's face. Mark lowered his tablet. Emily's hand tightened on her brochures. The unexpected tone of my voice, the deliberate framing of Mom's decision, subtly hinted that I was not about to rubber stamp their plans. I was about to unveil my own. "As you know," I continued, maintaining unwavering eye contact with David, "I appreciate your concern for my well-being and my future. However, the picture you've painted, lovely as it is, does not quite align with Mom's current vision for her life." I paused. Their discomfort was palpable. Their eyebrows were furrowed. They were searching for a way to interrupt, to redirect, to reclaim control of the narrative. This was David's territory, this room, this conversation. And I was now hijacking his carefully constructed stage. "Emily," I said, turning my gaze to her, my voice softening just slightly, but retaining its steel core. "You asked about me potentially downsizing. Mark, you talked about optimizing assets. And David," I turned back to him, "you lectured me on prudence and sustainable peace of mind for my mid-50s. I allowed a faint, knowing smile to touch my lips. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a strategist who holds all the cards. "So," I stated, the words clear, precise, utterly devoid of negotiation, "I'm pleased to inform you that Mom has decided to take your excellent advice. Not on downsizing, perhaps, but certainly on optimizing assets for maximum peace of mind. And for maximum, unadulterated freedom." I paused for effect, allowing the anticipation in the room to build. Mark, usually so composed, shifted in his seat. Emily looked directly at David, a silent plea for him to take control. But David, for once, was speechless. He sensed the ground shifting beneath him, a fundamental subversion he couldn't quite grasp. "Therefore," I declared, my voice resonating with an almost palpable authority, "I have formally put this Gold Coast condo on the market. It will be listed for an expedited sale. My realtor is prepared for a quick closing. We are accepting offers starting next week, with a firm deadline of 30 days. The words landed like thunderclaps in the quiet room. Mark's eyes widened, his tablet clattering to the floor. Emily gasped, dropping her brochures. David's face went utterly slack, his mouth slightly ajar, his carefully constructed composure shattering. Selling the condo? Mark choked out, his voice hoarse with shock and a dawning sense of betrayal. But Mom, that's my future investment. That's Emily's inheritance. And Emily, I continued, turning directly to my daughter, my voice carrying no trace of the tenderness I usually reserved for her, only cold, precise intent. You talked about retirement communities. You talked about making things easier for you. So I'm taking steps to make my next chapter profoundly easier. Not just for me, but for your peace of mind. You won't have to worry about managing my assets, or my senior health, or my old and dramatic hobbies. Because I won't be here to be managed. I clicked to the last slide of my personal presentation on the TV screen, an image of a pristine, white sand beach, bathed in sunlight. And then a small, subtle symbol, a single suitcase with a tiny world map printed on it. Because Mom, I announced, my voice clear and unwavering, letting the final, devastating piece of the puzzle fall into place, is also taking an extended sabbatical. Effective 2 months from now, or sooner if the sale goes quickly. A minimum of 1 year. I will be traveling, exploring, living entirely on my own terms. Unburdened, untraceable, silence. A profound, absolute, deafening silence. It stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the distant hum of Chicago traffic. They stared at me, frozen in their seats, utterly paralyzed by the enormity of what I had just unveiled. Their faces, once so self-assured, were now masks of pure, undiluted shock and horror. I hadn't just changed the plans for my life. I had changed the rules of the entire game. And they, the ones who had told me to let Mom talk, were now utterly speechless. Part 6. The hurricane of entitlement. The silence was short-lived, broken by a collective gasp from Mark and Emily, followed by David's strangled roar of disbelief. The peaceful setting of my Gold Coast condo transformed into a storm of raw, unbridled entitlement. Their assumptions, so casually held, had just been vaporized. You're selling the condo? Mark finally stammered, his face ashen, looking utterly betrayed. But Mom, what about our conversations? What about the investment strategy we discussed? You were going to use this for your stable retirement. For our future. His voice rose with indignation, his hands gesturing wildly as if to encompass his shattered financial projections. What about the stable retirement, where I shrink myself into a predictable box, Mark? I countered, my voice clear and unwavering, despite the storm. Where my creative pursuits are sweet hobbies, and my entire existence is funneled into making your lives more convenient. That kind of retirement. Emily, now visibly distraught, burst into tears, her face crumbling.
Mom.
How could you? You didn't even tell us. This is our family home. Where are we supposed to go when we come to Chicago for holidays? Where is my baby going to stay? You're abandoning us. This is completely selfish. Her dramatic sobs, once a potent tool to elicit guilt, now just echoed hollowly in the elegant room. Selfish. I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Is it selfish, Emily, for me to prioritize my own autonomy? Is it selfish to choose a life that truly fulfills me, rather than conforming to the comfortable expectations you have for my old age? When you tried to convert my home office, the very heart of my professional life, into your nursery without asking, was that selfish of me to refuse? David, meanwhile, had recovered from his initial shock, replacing it with a furious, paternalistic rage. He slammed his portfolio down on the coffee table, a loud thud that made the crystal vases jump. Linda, this is absolutely unacceptable. You're making rash, irrational decisions. This is menopause acting up again. You're completely unhinged. You're going to squander your assets. You're going to ruin everything. His voice was booming now, filling the room with his usual attempts at domination. I am perfectly rational, David, I replied, my voice dangerously calm, cutting through his bluster. And my assets are mine to manage. The decisions I make are for my life, not for your approval. You spent years dismissing my intelligence, ignoring my contributions, treating me like a convenience. You thought I was a static fixture in your life, easily manipulated. You told me to let Mom talk, implying that my thoughts needed your guidance. Now you are hearing Mom talk. And I assure you, you are hearing exactly what I intend for you to hear. Mark, ever the pragmatist, saw the brick wall of my resolve. He turned his anger on David.
Dad.
This is your fault. You were supposed to be managing her. You were supposed to ensure she stayed stable. His financial calculations, based on the assumption of a future inheritance, were dissolving before his eyes. The scene spiraled into a bitter, furious exchange. Emily's sobs grew louder, alternating with sharp, accusatory questions directed at me. David thundered about my unpredictability and emotional recklessness. Mark dissected his own perceived financial losses. They were a symphony of entitlement, their collective fury a raw, uncontrolled force. But against my unyielding calm, their power felt utterly hollow. I need to call my lawyer, David roared, reaching for his phone. You can't just sell the children's inheritance. You're welcome to do that, David, I said, a dry smile touching my lips. And I'm sure Catherine Rinaldi will be happy to remind you, once again, about who actually holds the deed. And about how much she's looking forward to charging you for her services. He froze, remembering the cost of our last divorce negotiation. The mention of Catherine's name, the cold, hard memory of his previous financial defeat, seemed to momentarily deflate his fury. Emily, distraught, jumped up. This is insane. You're breaking up the family. What about us, Mom? What about your grandchildren? You're just going to run off and leave us all alone. I am not running off, Emily, I said, standing up now, matching her eye level. I am pursuing my next chapter. And your grandchildren are always welcome in my life, on my terms, in my space, wherever that may be. But my choices are my own, just as your choices are yours. I looked at all three of them, frozen in their outrage, realizing they had utterly lost control. The irony was exquisite. They had told me to let Mom talk. And Mom had just announced her complete and total liberation. The truth, finally spoken, was a far more powerful weapon than any words of control they had ever uttered. Part 7. The seismic aftermath and the new geography. The family meeting, which had started with their polite attempts to control my future, ended with their utter implosion. They left my condo in a state of bewildered rage, their carefully constructed assumptions shattered. Emily's sobs followed them down the hall, echoing faintly in the usually silent corridor. David's angry shouts about legal action, swiftly countered by my mention of Catherine Rinaldi, quickly dissipated into the hum of the elevator. Mark, silent and ashen, simply retrieved his fallen tablet and walked out without a word. The aftermath, however, was not one of lingering anger for me. It was a profound and exhilarating liberation. The quiet hum of my condo, once tinged with the weight of their unspoken expectations, now resonated with pure, untainted peace. I had said it. I had done it. And I was free. My first call, even before they had likely reached their respective homes, was to Eleanor Vance, my realtor. Eleanor, I said, my voice clear and vibrant. The condo. Expedited sale. Price it to move in 30 days. No contingencies. Any viable offer, take it. And then, I need you to refer me to your top contact in international luxury travel agencies. Eleanor, a true professional, didn't bat an eye. Consider it done, Linda. I have a buyer pool eager for a quick closing in this market. And yes, I have excellent contacts in bespoke travel planning. Where are you off to? Everywhere, I said and laughed. It was a genuine, full-throated laugh, light and free, something I hadn't truly felt in years. The condo sold within 2 weeks, much faster than even Eleanor had predicted. The hot Chicago real estate market, combined with my aggressive pricing, meant multiple bids. I accepted the best cash offer. The closing was set for early December. It was happening. Mark and Emily, once they processed the irrefutable reality of the sale, shifted from anger to a frantic recalibration. Their expected inheritance, their carefully constructed future financial plan based on my assets, had vanished. Mark, ever the pragmatist, now focused on understanding how I had done it, seeking explanations for my swift, decisive action. "Mom," he called, his voice now tinged with a grudging respect. That was an incredibly aggressive market play. "A cash offer? Did you really take a hit on the price just to move it fast?" "I optimized for freedom, Mark," I replied, "not for maximum profit. Sometimes that's the most valuable return on investment." He paused, absorbing the new economic philosophy. Emily, after a few days of dramatic silence, came over. She didn't bring brochures for senior living this time. She brought a small, slightly wilted bouquet of flowers. She looked humbled and genuinely sad. "Mom," she said, her voice small, "I'm sorry. For everything. For calling you dramatic. For assuming things. We just didn't see you. We didn't understand that you had your own life. And your own plans." Tears welled in my eyes. Not tears of sadness for the past, but tears of gratitude for this profound, late-blooming honesty. "It's all right, Emily," I said, and it was. "I'm here now. And my door will always be open. Wherever that door might be." My sabbatical plans rapidly took shape. I booked an extended trip to Patagonia, an epic hiking expedition I had always dreamed of, but never allowed myself. Then, a multi-month photography workshop in the Italian Dolomites, followed by a spiritual retreat in Bali. My work with Harper Creative was already structured to be partially remote, and my team in Chicago was strong. My top clients were informed and understanding. My life, my very existence, was about to become completely unanchored, a free-floating entity on a global journey of discovery. David, however, was left in a different kind of freefall. The loss of his expected access to my financial life, the loss of his convenient presence in my perfectly managed home, was a profound blow to his control. His subtle efforts to portray me as unhinged or menopausal in our shared social circle fell flat. My friends knew me. My sister, Sarah, had already made sure David's network understood my quiet resolve. He was left in the quiet, bitter contemplation of his own miscalculations. His attempts to manage Mom had spectacularly backfired, leaving him exposed and powerless. The geographic shift in my life was a physical manifestation of my emotional and spiritual departure. I was taking a sabbatical not just from work, but from his expectations. And my new address was the entire world. Part 8. The untraceable journey. The departure day arrived, cold and crisp, a typical early December morning in Chicago. The condo was empty, gleaming, waiting for its new owners. My last few boxes had been shipped to a storage unit for later retrieval, should I ever decide to fully settle again. I had donated so much, sold the rest, reducing my physical possessions to the absolute essentials. It was a profound and liberating act of shedding layers, of untethering myself from the material world. I carried only 2 suitcases, one with clothes and practicalities, the other with my precious camera equipment and a small sketchbook. My life, simplified and distilled, was packed for adventure. I said goodbye to Mark and Emily at the airport. Their faces held a mix of pride, bewilderment, and a genuine, newfound respect. Emily hugged me tightly, her eyes a little misty. "Mom," she whispered, "text us. Call us. Just be safe. And thank you for everything." "You're welcome, darling," I said, holding her close. "And I will. But sometimes when you're truly free, you have to be a little untraceable too. Consider it my commitment to genuine rest. This old mom needs a real break from, well, from everyone." Mark, ever the pragmatist, pulled out his phone. "I set up a global roaming plan for you, Mom. Just in case." He still wanted to track me, I knew. But his gesture was laced with concern, not control. I smiled, accepted the phone, and gave them both a last hug. Then, I turned and walked toward security, a new kind of confidence in my stride. The departures board, displaying international flights, seemed to beckon me to a world utterly unburdened by past expectations. My sabbatical was everything I had yearned for, and more. Patagonia was breathtaking. The sheer scale of the mountains, the quiet majesty of the glaciers, reduced all my past anxieties to insignificant specks. My physical body, pushed by long, strenuous hikes, felt strong and capable. I slept deeply, undisturbed by past ghosts or nagging expectations. The pure, crisp air filled my lungs, and my mind was utterly clear, free of static. In the Italian Dolomites, I reconnected with my passion for landscape photography. The rolling hills, the dramatic peaks, the ancient villages, they became my muses. My eye was sharp, my focus intense. My hands, once precise in their digital manipulations, now found new grace with my camera. I reveled in the solitude, in the challenge of finding new beauty, in capturing it on film. I spent weeks in remote villages, speaking broken Italian, sharing meals with strangers, embracing the discomfort of the unfamiliar. It was pure joy. My interactions with my family were deliberately minimal. Weekly texts, mostly photos of breathtaking landscapes or local markets. An occasional short call where I could sense them trying to glean my plans, my return date. I was vague, serene. Just enjoying the moment, darlings. Not thinking about tomorrow. The mountains are calling. My freedom to be truly unavailable was the ultimate luxury. I let them worry, not out of malice, but out of necessity. They needed to feel the void my absence created. They needed to understand that my presence in their lives was a privilege, not a guarantee. They needed to fully realize that my resources, my availability, and my emotional labor were no longer infinitely renewable. My untraceable journey was a quiet, profound lesson in self-reliance for them and absolute self-sovereignty for me. This sabbatical wasn't just a break. It was a re-education. And they, unknowingly, were paying for the tuition. Part 9. The home of my own making. After 10 glorious months of untethered travel, I returned to Chicago. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. I had missed the city's electric pulse, its vibrant cultural scene, its architectural grandeur. But I returned on my own terms, to a life completely unburdened by past expectations. My children didn't know my exact return date. They didn't know where I would live. They simply knew Mom was coming back. I found a new space, a beautifully renovated townhouse in Ukrainian Village, a neighborhood far from the Gold Coast and Lincoln Park, filled with vibrant murals, cozy cafes, and a quiet, artistic energy. It was smaller, certainly, than the condo, but it had a small garden and felt utterly private, utterly mine. There were no unspoken expectations here. No lingering ghosts. It was a blank canvas for my truly independent next act. My physical and emotional landscape reflected my surroundings. My energy was boundless. My skin, tanned and glowing from months under foreign suns, seemed to radiate an inner peace. The fine lines around my eyes were still there, but now they were laughter lines, not worry lines. My body, which had once felt like a source of shame and discomfort, was now a powerful vessel that had carried me through mountains, deserts, and jungles. I was deeply, profoundly comfortable in my own skin. Harper Creative, which I had managed remotely during my sabbatical, flourished upon my full-time return. My international travels, my new experiences, brought a fresh perspective and global sensibility to my designs. I was sought after for my unique insights, my calm authority. I wasn't just a designer. I was a storyteller, a woman who had lived 100 lives in a single year. My business thrived not on clients' demands, but on my own passionate creativity. My relationships with Mark and Emily had settled into a new, healthier equilibrium. Their initial shock at my disappearance, followed by weeks of my deliberate unavailability, had taught them invaluable lessons about my autonomy. They no longer assumed my home was their asset. They no longer expected me to drop everything for their convenience. Their calls were now genuinely inquisitive, respectful. They truly asked about my life, my adventures, my current projects. They respected my boundaries. They honored my choices. Mark, ever the pragmatic, seemed to have learned the most profound financial lesson from my sabbatical. He had come to understand that assets weren't just inherited. They were earned, curated, protected through thoughtful planning. He no longer tracked my real estate movements. Instead, he would consult me on his own diversified investment strategies, seeking my old-fashioned prudence, as he now called it, with genuine deference. Emily, perhaps missing the consistent connection she had unknowingly taken for granted, called more frequently. She genuinely valued my insights on balancing a demanding career with her new family life. She no longer spoke of her modern life with subtle condescension, but with shared vulnerabilities. My granddaughter, Clara, was a vibrant, joyful toddler, and I cherished my scheduled, precious hours with her, hours that were chosen out of love, not obligation. David, my ex-husband, however, was still trying to grasp the new reality. He had lost track of me completely during my sabbatical. He called Sarah once, fishing for my new address. Sarah, my loyal sister, simply said, "Linda's where she needs to be." "And you're where you need to be, David. Your choices." He remained in his downtown condo, a relic of a life he couldn't quite maintain without my invisible scaffolding. He was, I suspected, still waiting for me to settle into a predictable pattern, one he could perhaps eventually influence or reclaim. But Mom was done with patterns. Mom was charting her own course. Part 10. The unseen strings of true freedom. I stood in my new townhouse garden in Ukrainian village, the evening sun casting long shadows through the budding trees. The cool Chicago air felt clean and invigorating. My life now was a tapestry woven with threads of intention, resilience, and unapologetic self-sovereignty. It was a masterpiece I had painted, brushstroke by careful brushstroke, fueled by the fierce clarity born of my profound personal transformations. They had gathered in my living room, intending to dictate my future, telling me to let Mom talk, as if my voice was secondary to their agenda. They saw my age, my past, and my gender as limitations, expecting me to conform to a comfortable, controllable narrative. But they had profoundly misjudged me. They had no idea that the mom they were addressing was no longer bound by their rules, their expectations, or their definitions of what a woman in her 50s should be. My decision to sell the property, to cut the tether, and embark on a sabbatical was not just a dramatic act. It was a surgical strike against the unseen strings that had, for decades, subtly controlled my life. It was a declaration that my time, my space, and my autonomy were no longer negotiable assets for their convenience or their projected futures. The freedom I now felt, the boundless joy in my creative work, in my relationships, in simply being, that was the priceless payoff. The true strength of my quiet defiance, I realized, lay not in a grand confrontation, but in the unwavering consistency of my self-reclamation. I didn't need to yell to be heard. I simply needed to act. And my actions, grounded in unwavering self-respect, spoke volumes. My second act was not a final performance. It was a continuous unfolding, a celebration of boundless possibility. And Mom was only just beginning to write her most exciting chapters. Linda turns to address the camera directly. She is in her new townhouse garden, surrounded by vibrant greenery. Her face is radiant with peace, confidence, and genuine joy. Have you ever found yourself at a family meeting or in a similar situation where those closest to you, your children, your siblings, a partner, subtly tried to dictate your future, making plans for your life without truly hearing your voice? Did they dismiss your desires, perhaps with labels like old or dramatic, simply because your vision for your life didn't align with their expectations for you? Tell me your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the profound importance of asserting our autonomy in midlife, especially when confronted with the well-meaning but ultimately controlling expectations of those we love. Your journey of reclaiming your right to choose might be the exact inspiration someone else needs to finally speak their truth. And if you're ready to rewrite your own script, to calmly announce your own terms, and to embrace the complete sovereignty of your unique second act, make sure you subscribe to The Silent Change After 50. We are building a powerful community where women over 50 are breaking free from invisible chains, finding their true voices and designing lives of profound purpose and boundless joy. Join us